In today's lesson, we are going to be looking at conversions. Now, this might be a very straightforward lesson, might be something that you catch on to quick, but it is important that we cover this before we get into a lot more of our measurement unit, because we may need to convert between different forms of measurement when dealing with some of the problems that we come across. So in class, we will go over a couple videos that just kind of go through the two different systems of measurement that there tend to be, the imperial system and the metric system. Now, the metric system is the common one that you find in almost every country, except for, I believe, two, maybe three. And in those 2 to 3 countries, you have the imperial system, which is what is commonly used in the United States. So the two videos just kind of go over them, just explains them. It does talk about the absurd different types of measurements in the imperial system. You know the common ones: pounds, feet, inches, and so on, but there's quite a lot more that you may not know. So here's kind of a small little diagram or flow chart that does kind of go through the different forms of measurement. So over here on the right, these are our common metric system measurements. They're all of the form base 10, so they all kind of relate to each other in some factor of 10. And so these are the ones we're kind of common with: millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers. We're familiar with those ones in our measurements. Again, in the imperial system is everything else. So the ones that we might be familiar with: inches to feet to yards. You might know miles. Again, these are all mostly the distance measurements. We will talk a bit more, but you can see how many other different types of imperial measurements there are, and they're not very nicely related. Right? We just mentioned how the metric system is all factors of 10. Well, here inches, you could say, well, 2 inches is a stick, but 12 inches is a foot, 3 inches is a palm, and so on. So it's not the nicest system to use, but again, because the United States does use it, it is going to be a commonly seen measurement system because of how influential the United States is. It would be a lot easier probably if everyone just switched to one form, but we may not see that happen, so we will have to kind of stick with the two. But as long as we know how to convert, we shouldn't have any issues. So again, just looking at some general conversions, we see the different types of units. Again, liters in the metric system, fluid ounce, pint, gallon in the imperial system. This is looking for when we look at volume. The meter compared to a mile, a foot, a yard, an inch. We kind of mentioned those ones. That's kind of distance. So those are our distance measurements. Those are the difference between the two systems. And lastly, in the metric system, you might see gram. In the imperial system, you might see pound, inch, ounce, ton. Again, these are measurements for weight, measurements for weight. So you see the difference between them. There's a lot more when we look at the imperial system compared to the metric. So we're going to look at a general formula that will help us in any type of conversion, converting between one unit to another. So if we look here, we want to figure out how many millimeters is 14 centimeters. 14 centimeters equals how many millimeters? Now, if you think about the question and do it on your own, or do it quickly in your head, you could probably come up quickly with an answer. Right? Based on what you know about the two, you would say 140 millimeters. That's how many millimeters there are in 14 centimeters. Now again, quite quick for you to do in your head, 140 millimeters. But what exactly are you doing? What are the steps that you're doing to get this, and why are you using those steps? Because taking that quick kind of math that you just did, you can use that same concept to do any type of conversion. And that general formula, or what you may have been doing, can be kind of written out in this kind of general or kind of standardized formula. which is the units we start with, or the units that we have, and we're going to multiply that by a fraction or a unit rate, is what this is sometimes called. So we might multiply it by a fraction or a unit rate. Essentially, it's the same thing. And this is something that's always going to be given to you. The unit rate will be given to you in the question, or it's something that you can easily find because it is required. So it's basically someone's kind of already done a similar comparison. Now we're just going to use that. So the units we start with or have multiplied by the fraction of the units we want divided by the units we have. Well, how does that make sense? We're just dealing with a bunch of units. Let's go through a couple of examples. We want to convert each of the following measurements. So we want to convert 20 inches to centimeters. So what we need to do for this is we need to have our unit rate. The unit rate is going to give us the kind of this base conversion, which in this case is that 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters. That's our unit rate. So if we use that general formula, it says, okay, what are the units that we start with? Well, we start with 20 inches. So we're going to take 20 inches, we're going to multiply it by our unit rate, which is this here. So if we multiply that by the unit rate, the formula says, well, we multiply it by the units we want, which is centimeters, and the number is 2.54. So 2.54 centimeters divided by 1 inch, or 1 inch, which is the units we have for that unit rate. And then we just calculate. So essentially we do 20 times 2.54 divided by 1, and we get 50.8 centimeters. And that's our conversion. If we look at the next example, 15 square meters to square feet. So again, we need to have our unit rate. Now this would be given to us, or we could easily find it. So our unit rate is 0.0929, 0.0929 meters squared equals 1 square foot. So again, the unit rate is given to us. It's always going to be a relationship between one of something to another measurement. So here it's a comparison of 1 square foot equals how many square meters. You could have it the other way around. You could find out how many square feet are in 1 square meter. It just depends on the unit rate that you find or that you're given. So now we're going to use our general formula. The units we start with, 15 square meters. We're going to multiply that now by our fraction or our unit rate. We're going to start with the units we want, which is square feet, so 1 square foot, divided by the units we have. Let's make this bracket a little bigger, which is the 0.0929 meters squared. And this will give us our final answer. So we do 15 times 1, doesn't change it, divided by 0.0929, and we get 161.46 feet squared. So 15 square meters is equal to 161.46 square feet. So you can see how this general form works for any conversion if we're given the unit rate, which again we will be, or we can easily find it. For C, 4,000 millimeters to decimeters or decameters. So here we need to know a unit rate. So the unit rate that will be given is that 100 millimeters is equal to 1 decameter. Now we have to use our general formula. Start with the units we have. So 4,000 millimeters. And we're going to multiply that by our unit rate, which is the units we want. So 1 decameter divided by the units we have, which is 100 millimeters. So 4,000 times 1 doesn't change anything. Divided by 100, we get 40 decameters. So 4,000 millimeters is equal to 40 decameters. Or decimeters. 7 megaliters to decaliters. So again, same kind of idea. We need to come up with a unit rate. And the unit rate in this case is that 1 megaliter. I'm not quite sure what that measurement is, or that the unit symbol, but we'll say megaliters, is equal to 10,000 decaliters. So that's our unit rate. So we have 7 megaliters, and we're going to multiply that by our unit rate, the units we want on top, divided by the units we have on the bottom. So 7 times 10,000 divided by 1 gives us 70,000 decaliters. So again, same general formula using the unit rate will allow us to convert any two kind of measurements together. Let's take a look at one word problem. So a U.S. Airways plane lands at an airstrip in Toronto. The pilot instructs the fuel tanker to only fill the tank with 15,000 gallons of fuel for the next trip. The fuel tanker measures in liters. How many liters should the plane receive? So again, we need to have a unit rate comparing gallons to liters. So in this case, we can know that 1 gallon is equal to 3.785 liters. Now that we have our unit rate, we can go through and use our conversion. So we have 15,000 gallons is what we're starting with. We're going to multiply that by our unit rate, or 3.785 liters divided by 1 gallon. Right, the units we want divided by the units we have. And when we multiply 15,000 by 3.785, we get 56775 liters rounded, which is how many liters of fuel the plane should receive. Now this might seem like a very straightforward calculation, but something where there was an error in calculations did happen on an Air Canada flight a while back in, like, I believe the 1980s or so on. You can see the picture here. Essentially, a plane was filled with an incorrect amount of fuel due to a conversion error, and the plane had to land on a small little landing strip or airport in the middle of Manitoba. So this is something that does have some real life consequences, because if you make a conversion error like that, there are some consequences or some terrible accidents that could happen. And then again, you have your standard ones of making measurements, doing construction, things like that. So you can see where conversions, or hopefully you see where conversions come into play, even if it's something as traveling across the border, converting money, buying online from different countries, and so on. So hopefully you do see and now are able to make conversions between different units.